Hello, my name is Lee Thurburn, and I'm doing another strategic analysis of China and what's going on within China and between China and the rest of the world. And so this episode is about China's collapse, which is happening right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to review recent information over the last 3 or 4 months, basically since the first of the year, but delving a little bit farther back in time to give you an understanding of why I say that China's collapse is happening right now. So I want to first give some acknowledgement to the YouTube channel called China Insights. This is a channel that provides a steady stream of interviews and insights about what's going on inside of China. What's valuable about this channel is that it's not in any way associated with the Chinese Communist Party. Another great source of information about what's going on in China is a channel called Serpensa, which likewise is a resource that is not in any way associated with the Chinese Communist Party and gives you valid insights into what's going on inside of China. Two totally different perspectives. But today, I'll be relying primarily on reports over the last several months from China Insights. And we're going to start with the fact that China's economy is not just slowing down, but it's rapidly going into not just a recession, but a depression. And I think this is going to be a deep depression. So in the last, about 2 months ago, China Insights made a report about how over 460,000 Chinese companies have closed down and how over 800 million people in China are in debt, and that China's 2023 economy is in economic collapse. Well, there is a lot of reasons for why this is going on, but let's start by focusing on Guangdong province, which is China's richest province. Provinces are like states, and in Guangdong province, they're sending 300,000 young people back to the countryside. Now, over the last 20 years, 30 years, China has had a net migration from the countryside to the big metropolitan areas as people left the farms and came into town to be able to get good factory jobs and that sort of thing. And in the process, there was just a massive growth in demand for housing and all other kinds of services in the cities. So the question is, why is this large province and financially successful province sending 300,000 young people back to the countryside? And the reason is because there's not enough jobs in Guangdong cities, and because the Chinese Communist Party is afraid that the potential for large congregations of unemployed students basically makes for a formula where a lot of political protests might arise, and these in fact could spread to the rest of the nation because of the economic collapse that's going on. So it's not just the young people that are suffering from high unemployment. It's massive across the nation. But the reason that Guangdong is sending these people to the countryside is in part because they want to be able to get them away from the cities where they can congregate in large mass and potentially start protests that could potentially spread to the rest of the country. I look for this to be a formula for how other provinces will likewise begin to deal with the situation of unemployment, shipping people out to the countryside and giving them opportunities to be agricultural mechanics. Basically, an agricultural mechanic here in the United States is the equivalent of a farm worker, a laborer that works on the farm. So give the students a job, call them an agricultural mechanic, and send them out to the farms. Interestingly, according to China's main career development platform, of the 2023 graduates, hiring statistics show that only about 15% of college graduates are finding work in their field. Most are not finding work at all. China's unemployment situation is the worst that it's been in the last 40 years, and that's due to the economic downturn that's been brought on by the collapse in foreign orders for factory goods made in China. Now, across China, factories are losing orders and having to close. that has elevated a Save the Boss campaign, which basically means that businesses, people are trying to figure out ways to save the boss, which is the employer. And the reason that bosses, so you ask why? The reason that employers are shutting down factories is because foreign companies have dramatically reduced the level of orders that they're sending to China due to two factors. One is the supply chain issues that arose during the pandemic, and then the other is the increasingly belligerent attitude that the Chinese Communist Party is having towards the rest of the world on the world stage, and specifically as it relates to the Taiwan issue. Now, the high-tech manufacturing sector in China is almost completely shut down, with many factories permanently closed. And the question to this, why, is the answer is because the United States has imposed a ban back in October, a ban on the export of advanced semiconductor chips, manufacturing equipment, and any services related to the manufacture of advanced semiconductors in China. That means people and companies have to quit providing services to China if those services relate in any way, shape, or form to the production or design or any other aspect related to advanced semiconductors. Now, this ban was imposed because these advanced chips are being used by China in their military infrastructure and equipment. And China's shift to a much more aggressive and belligerent military combative posture with the Western world has caused economic relations with the United States to deteriorate. The United States is retaliating to try to prevent China from becoming a potentially more serious combatant power. Now, China's largest technology company, Huawei, is actually struggling to even stay afloat here in 2023. Why? Because, again, the United States and most European countries have banned Huawei from selling communications infrastructure equipment into these Western countries because of security concerns. Because the CCP, the Communist Chinese Party, has ownership of Huawei and has control of Huawei, and they could potentially utilize these communications infrastructure equipment as a way to spy on and potentially disrupt communications in Western countries in the event of a kinetic conflict arising with China. Now, in general, China's technology industry also is struggling to stay afloat. If you basically segregate chips into three tiers, low tier, mid tier, and advanced or high tier, the high tier chips are the ones that have been shut down. The mid tier chips are somewhat impacted. The low tier chips are not really impacted. So why is this impact occurring? Well, again, this is occurring because the United States implemented a ban back in October of 2022 on the exports of advanced chips. So this is having a significant negative impact on China's technology sector. So one of the things that's actually also going on is that Chinese factories are moving to other countries, in particular Vietnam, but other countries. And so why is this happening? Chinese labor costs are one of the reasons. They have increased significantly over the last 20 years, and this, along with a general decline in Western purchases due to supply chain issues and political concerns, has made manufacturing in China a very risky and less reliable business model. China is no longer a desirable location from a variety of perspectives for Western companies to get products or components made or assembled in. If you look at China's ports are actually clogging up with empty containers that have no cargo in them destined for export markets. Why is this significant? Well, again, why is this happening? Well, exports to Western countries, Western markets have dried up because, again, of supply chain issues and because China has become increasingly belligerent, is a bully in the Western Pacific region. You can look at the Spratly Islands, their military buildup, their saber rattling regarding Taiwan. The message is clear. China is sending a message. War is coming. It's undeniable. There are 200 million foreclosures as of a couple of months ago in real estate properties in China. Unemployment is increasing, wages are decreasing, and inflation is rising. So why are these things happening? Well, China's march towards confrontation with the West over Taiwan and the Spratly Islands, as mentioned, along with a general rise in its aggressive posturing, has made it clear to the West that doing business with China is a mistake, when China clearly is planning for a confrontation and war with the West, again, over Taiwan, but not just over Taiwan. If we look at the U.S. government's posturing, the U.S. government is increasingly becoming prepared for war with China. Why? Well, it's become increasingly clear that China is on a path for conflict with the United States and the Western world over Taiwan, and more generally over China's desire to be a dominant role player on the global stage. Time is not on China's side, as economic collapse will erode China's ability to compete with the United States, both in military and economic terms. And China's relative parity point with the Western world at this point in time is the highest that it's been ever. So China's kind of in a use it or lose it sort of situation. The final note that I'd like to make is that you look at a lot of the Chinese retail sector, and for example, in cars, China's retailers are having trouble selling big ticket items, and they're beginning to sell their inventory at dramatically reduced prices. Why? Economic decline is causing consumers to rethink big ticket items as factories close, unemployment continues to increase, and the government tells the population to register for the draft and prepare for war over Taiwan. Can you say, Western devils, one of the most common ways that countries that are suffering, especially authoritarian regimes, that are suffering political and economic collapse internally, deal with controlling their population is to point the finger outside the country at other nations that are causing them all of their problems and to build nationalistic fervor. This is exactly what is happening in China right now. So the question becomes, how likely is war and when would it happen? So my current estimates of when war with China is likely to break out basically boil down to this. There's about a 15% probability that it could happen this year. It certainly is not a zero probability. As you go further into the future, the probability increases relatively dramatically. There are any number of things that could kick off a war with China. One of the things that could do this is going on right now, which is a rapid rearming or increased arming of Taiwan with advanced Western military hardware. Taiwan has made over $15 billion worth of hardware purchases from the United States, much of which has yet to be delivered. The United States has rapidly increased the allocation of shipments of hardware to Taiwan. And if you're China and you're sitting there watching the island of Taiwan arm up with advanced Western weapons, making a retake of Taiwan yet more difficult, if you're watching your economy in collapse and your inability to get advanced chips for your weapons and military infrastructure escalating into a real problem, and you're looking at political turmoil, what are you going to do? You know, time is not on China's side. So the farther out into the future that we go, the more likely some sort of conflict with China is. What do you think? Are we going to go to war with China? If so, when will it start? I'd love to hear from you. Please tell me your thoughts. If you enjoyed the content on this video, please be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, and again, please leave a comment. Thank you for watching.